you here with us, and thank you for joining. We really appreciate your time that you've taken this morning to be with us, and to, of course, we want to also share with you some of our insights with regards to RRC, and of course the achievements we have today, this morning. Been joined by Colin Kamu, who is our Director e-Government, and of course he will be taking us on as one of the panelists. And then of course we have Mr. Paul Ngabirano, who is our Infrastructure Implementation Manager, who will also be taking us on of course the journey. Yes, will also be taking us on the journey of connectivity as an enabler for Uganda's sustainable development. So, and me, I take this opportunity as your host or moderator this morning to welcome you all. I'd also request that we want to also know you. I know you registered, but it will also be good if you can, in this chat section, you can share your entities that you're representing. It is good for us to know, of course, the people that we are engaging this morning. So you can go to the chat section and type your entity position. That is very critical for us to know, and because we really need to touch base, not only on this platform, but even other engagements. So that will really help us. Thank you. So this morning, without any much ado, we will definitely start off quickly, and then we believe that the rest of other people will definitely find us on our way. Of course, just a brief background, really brief background to RRC, the Regional Communication Infrastructure project. Started, of course, in 2016, and of course, in this month, end of this month, August 31st, the project will definitely come to a conclusion. The project mainly touched about 4 sectors: agriculture, health, education, and the general sector, and it had two key objectives. And these were to lower the cost of internet, and of course also expand the geographical reach of the NBI to across the country, and then of course the development of e-government services, improve government efficiency and transparency through the development and rollout of e-government services. So this morning specifically, we will be looking at those 2 key areas as already on the flyer. We'll be looking at those 2 key areas. One is the e-services and social economic transformation. What is it that e-services can do? What is it that e-services can do in terms of creating efficiency, both in government, but also in the provision of services to the citizens. Then, of course, the other area which we'll be looking at is the connectivity as an enabler for Uganda's sustainable development. So these are the 2 key areas. And without any much ado, I would like to invite Colin as one of the first panelists to take us on to the e-services, the journey of Uganda, taking services online, and what is that? What is the importance of having automations or services online? What does it mean to have services online for an ordinary citizen? And then, of course, what is the impact? What impact is there when these services indeed go online? So, Colin, I invite you, sir, to give us a brief background to this, and of course, then a small introduction. I know that the participants would love to, to know Colin, and then, of course, later on we'll be moving on to Gabriano Paul, and then, of course, the other part of the program, we will then get some question and answer sessions where we provide additional clarity. So let me take this opportunity once again to welcome all of you. Okay, someone was already raising a hand, but I think they dropped it. Now, Colin, over to you, sir. Without any much ado, you're very welcome to discuss or to tell us more about e-services. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me just reset my, hopefully you can hear me and see me. Thank you, Richard. I think maybe just in a few minutes, just to do an introduction and initial thoughts, and I'm happy for you to guide me on the best way to move forward. But I really want to thank our attendees this morning, or even this afternoon, wherever you are logged in from. And thank you for making time to just listen to some of the achievements and where we're standing with the Regional Communication Infrastructure Program that has been commissioned. And from an e-government perspective, first of all, just to elaborate, the one of the major pillars for RCIP was e-government applications. And that was extremely important because we believed that we needed to cover maybe 4 major sectors, by transforming public service delivery using ICT, which actually improves the lives of Ugandans. And therefore, we took on about 4 sectors: agriculture, health, education, and what we're calling JELOS, or Justice, Law and Order sector. But even before I get to that, people always ask, what is e-governance? As Director of E-Government Services, for so long, citizens have been interacting with the government through traditional public services. And in other words, you line up, you go to a place, you queue, you get a service. So let's talk about things that you all do. You go to NIRA, you line up, you get a service. At the airstrip, for instance, you have to go back to the bank and pay, and you queue up, wait for some days. Then they say, okay, go to a driving permit. You go line up for the driving permit, but then you require an ID. You have to go back to NIRA. You go for a passport. You have to go back and forth different services. We are saying that e-government service, or e-services in a summary, is how do we take public services to the citizens? So how do we take the government to the citizens rather than citizens coming to the government, as is the traditional case? How can we, for instance, be able to provide seamless, convenient, cost-effective, and customer-friendly services to our citizens without them driving out of their homes, driving out of their offices, but using ICT on tablets, phones, laptops, be able to access the government? And that's really the gist of e-services. And this can span across anything. Forget just the e-passport or filing of taxes, which is e-tax, doing permit registrations. You want to register a business name, must you go to URSB, or can you go online? How can we bring government services online for the convenience of our citizens? And that was a primary pillar for RCIP. We say not just providing an environment or also doing connectivity, we required to also do e-services. That was a third major element about the RCIP. So I think that gives you perspective around what e-government services are. E-government services assist us to bring the government to you. And I think it's a major element. So one of the things that we did, in summary, our team as Directorate of E-Government, our job in summary is to really coordinate ministries, departments, and agencies to think electronic when it comes to service delivery. But how do you deliver a service when there's no infrastructure? So that's why you'll hear from Paul, it's extremely important that we lay e-government infrastructure throughout the country. We must lay fiber optic to hospitals, to schools, up to the parish level or village level to ensure every citizen is connected. If every citizen is connected and has access to either a smartphone or a government hub or one-stop center somewhere, they can now access these services. If you have a smartphone, the idea and our vision is where we are going is to actually deliver all our services, most of our government services on your phone, the comfort of your phone. But how do you get passport, permit, IDs, everything on the phone without integrating government services first? So what RCIP did was to now begin to lay the infrastructure foundations that will allow us to deliver e-services, because those are not there. It is one thing to have an enabling legal environment where we have the laws. Now you have the infrastructure, which we are grateful that RCIP was able to lay, and Paul will share more on that. But now on the delivery side of e-services, we needed to now take every government entity and begin to connect them and integrate them. So we have what we call UG Hub. UG Hub was one of the major deliverables of the e-services, to be able to integrate all MDAs, ministries, departments, agencies, to share data. Because ministries and departments and agencies have been working in silos. They have been very independent and in silos. But if we integrate them now with what we're calling UG Hub, and we also use something called UG Pass, we've also implemented UG Pass, which is digital authentication. We now know that this is Colin and he's online. He has securely logged in to a citizen's portal, for instance, and now has access to all the different MDA applications. If you want to get to passport, click passport. You want to apply for national ID, apply for national ID. You want to apply for a business name, click and actually apply. So we had to begin to lay all this infrastructure together to actually deliver that. I'm happy to share most of the deliverables. In summary, one of the major deliverables that we had was setting up a data center, a tier 3 data center, which for the first time in Uganda brings government entities under one roof to provide shared services to citizens. For instance, now we are hosting the e-government procurement system in one place, secured in one place, and the whole of government can now use it. We're now cutting the cost of government. We're now hosting the human capital management or the payroll system for all civil servants, also under one roof. So a number of e-services are now sitting under one roof. We have more than 190, towards 200 applications now for the government under this data center. We also set up an SMS gateway, which allows notifications. Whenever you make a payment or you make a transaction, you need notifications as citizens to your phones. Now we are cutting the cost of government delivery by using this SMS gateway. And so these are the different things that we're able to do and achieve in this time. And I mean, I could articulate them further, Richard, as we go forward. But I think I wanted to give an intro that the idea was to provide shared platform, what we're calling build once and use many times, or use many, for citizens and for the government. And this works in two layers. We make efficient the government by sharing data and having shared infrastructure and government services, but also citizens now will be getting a citizens portal, one interface where you log in and you now have access to different public services that are now online. That is really sort of the gist and quick summary, Richard. I'm happy to take on more, and there are many achievements that I can articulate, but I think I would be happy to take them on as we go along. Thank you. Richard, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Colin, for that insightful discussion with regards to e-services. And that is the gist of everything that we do, is that through RSC, we've indeed put up these services, and we are currently now rolling them out to the different government entities, and of course, as far as local government. The ideal thing is that we want every citizen to access these services online, interact with government much more, and in a more efficient way. So at this time, also, let me invite this opportunity to invite Paul. Paul is our infrastructure delivery manager, and Paul has a wealth of knowledge in this area in terms of infrastructure built in this country. He has experience of over 20 years and even over in regards to the rollout of infrastructure. Paul, kindly share with us some insights on, of course, how far we've come as a country in terms of rollout of e-government and infrastructure, that is the backbone, but also what are some of those experiences that you had to go through that possibly our participants would want to hear the journey, and of course some of those challenges, how we've been maneuvered to be where we are today, and of course what do we envisage in the near future. So Paul, over to you, and members, you're all very welcome to this platform. We really appreciate you being online, and we know that we'll have a very fruitful engagement this morning. Paul, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for this opportunity to present to the participants. As building on to what my colleague has just said, in this journey for digitization, infrastructure is a very important component, because it is one of the components that's supporting how all these services will be delivered to the user. So the two main things that we have done in terms of infrastructure, the first one, I think my colleague has highlighted in it, was on the data center. We have built capacity to have applications hosted in a secure and in a secure manner that will allow them an uptime that is on 100%. So the importance of this data center is that, as applications are built by various entities, just looking at the government side, they need storage, they need processing, they need access, and rationalizing all of this into one place meant that now it is very easy for any entity, whether it is passport, immigration, finance, and all the others. It is very easy for them to think about just developing the application and then have it hosted, and then it will be accessible. Now, when it is accessible in our data center, which also has redundancy in other areas, we are sure that this application is going to be accessible 24/7 all year round. And then it is supported by a backbone. And the backbone, what this backbone is doing is that the application, the people that are holding this, develop this content are in various places across the country. They could be in MDAs, they could be in local governments, and so they are able to interact with our data center through our national backbone. So the backbone, we built a backbone which is now over 4,000 kilometers across the country, covering about 55 of the districts currently, and building under the RC project, we were able to extend from what we initially had in the last phases and come to this 4,000. Now, this infrastructure is very critical mainly in two ways, because it is supporting the way data is moving on the side of the content holders, who are the NDAs and government offices. It's supporting the way in which this data is coming from whoever is managing it, whoever is building it, to the data center, and then also supporting how the citizens interact by having high-speed capacity available across the country. One would say that we also have wireless coverage. Yes, indeed, we know that 90% of the country is covered by some of this coverage, wireless coverage, but this backbone infrastructure is coming in to support, to increase the capacity, because as we go up the value chain of capacity and connectivity, the type of services that we can develop keep on improving. If I can just give you an example that, a few years ago, we had maybe mobile money, which was a text-based service that was based on what was existing. Now, when you look at the financial sector, you could say that the mobile money increased financial inclusion just by having a simple, just based on that simple technology. But now the options for finance have grown beyond that. So the applications that are going to be coming out will be more than just the text-based. What you see in the fintech screens that they're delivering a lot of new opportunities in the financial sector. Now that can only be supported by increased development in the capacity of the networks, in the capacity of the storage, the capacity of the applications. So that is where the infrastructure that we have built comes in to support this. Thank you.
Paul, of course, Paul has highlighted a very critical areas. Of course, infrastructure, it is that is the one through which all these services run to. And maybe going back to maybe going back to Colin. Maybe going back to you a bit with regards to e-services. A lot of people will maybe want to hear also the areas that we tackled around, of course, the number one thing there, you talk about the UG Pass, which of course is authentication. I know the other services that possibly we developed through RSC, which our participants would also like to, leverage on what are those opportunities through these projects that they can also leverage on to interact with government. A case in point, maybe can you shed some more light in terms of the emailing system also for government? I know that has been very critical, and members of the public are asking in some areas as they transact with some government entities or even local governments, people are still on the other conventional platform, to use. Now, as government, we built a standardized emailing platform. Can you just shed some more light there? And then, of course, the areas of information security, how are we faring in terms of securing this infrastructure, securing these services as we go online? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. You give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I've just changed to my, you can hear me well? Perfect. So I think you raise a good point, and Paul has also, I think, articulated the infrastructure side. Basically to our viewers and all those who are listening, part of the achievement really is, think of this project really as trying to get the foundations done. We're trying to build a house, and we needed to lay the foundation. I can tell you that there was no organized foundation for the ICT sector before this project. We didn't have a shared data center. We did not have integration of MDAs. Everybody was working in silos. You are KCCA, you do what you do. People walk to your building, they get services. If they need the NSSF, they must walk to NSSF. If they need the URA, please walk across the road to URA. But now we are saying, for the first time, we're now laying the roads before e-services can now take off. E-health, e-education. Think about, at that point now we can innovate and do just about anything electronic, but we must first lay the foundations. And that is why even the fiber optic, however far it has gone, we need to get to the farthest point within the parishes and villages. And that way we give access and inclusion to everybody. So we are really being on the foundation stage. But speaking of the applications, I think you raised an issue around the messaging. So we call it the Unified Messaging and Collaboration System, or UMCS. For the government did not have a unified messaging system. A simple component of that UMCS is email. And that's just the simplest use case you could say. People in government till today, I must confess, many government workers still use Yahoo, Hotmail. Some of the young people don't even know Hotmail, I'm sure, but they use Gmail, right? So they use Gmail to do government work. And we're saying, no, we need to roll out a unified email system, which is only one component of messaging and collaboration. Messaging and collaboration could involve video, chats, document management, but in this case, it would be basically email as a use case for everybody to understand. So we began rolling out a unified email system for the government. So you should be able to see .go.ug as an official email domain for people. If it is calling, it should be calling.wabirukamu@nita.go.ug. You should have somebody writing an email on behalf of government at finance.go.ug. Now, for many people, that may look like a small thing, but it's actually a major element of trying to standardize the IT sector, but within government. So we set out under RCIP, this particular project, to do what we call the Messaging and Collaboration System, or UMCS. And out of that so far, I'm happy to note that we have 20,000 licenses or users already on. Now, this is still much lower than we need to go, but this is a good start. 20,000 government workers are now running on the Messaging and Collaboration System. And this is spanning about 123 entities or MDAs are now using. We're talking about local governments, we're talking about ministries, we're talking about agencies. They are now running on this government system. So that was the first thing we did. In the next phase of this project, which is now what we're calling the Uganda Digital Acceleration Program, which is really the phase 2, you could say, of RCIP, which we're celebrating today and talking about today, we should be able to now begin to double or even triple the numbers that we have done in this current phase. So just to answer your question, we have about 20,000 email addresses already within government, and that's a good start. We want everybody communicating from Parliament, as a minister, as a permanent secretary, as an ordinary IT officer within government, to actually use official. And that's one of the things that we're sending a note out to government very soon, to ensure that nobody is communicating officially, but using Gmail. And this is happening even in the international, our offices and embassies all over the world. People still use Gmail, for instance. And so we need to work with foreign affairs. We need to work with internal affairs. We need to work with police. We need to work with prisons. We need to work with all the entities to standardize messaging and collaboration. So that was the one big step that was done under RCIP. The other quick one may be just to say UG Hub also, before I go to security, very briefly. UG Hub is the word we're using for integrating. It's a hub that brings MDAs together. In this hub, for instance, just some quick statistics, we now have about 31 MDAs integrated. These are major data producers who are now integrated. You think about URA, think about public service, think about Ministry of Finance, these are big data, NIRA. Think about the big producers of data now integrated as a first step, which is a big plus, I think, in terms of moving forward. On UG Hub, we have now 21 commercial banks and smaller financial institutions on UG Hub, because citizens now, as much as we are integrating government systems, they also need to pay for government services. And therefore, integrating banks who also want to help with this payment ecosystem is important, but also banks want to talk to NIRA for their KYC or opening of accounts. So we're now facilitating 21 banks are now on our system, and about 8 private entities. From January, when we started, we have had more than 340,000 transactions going through UG Hub, just UG Hub, the system that's connecting. So even payroll is happening on UG Hub, with HCM,
HCM is the Human Capital Management System. So just to highlight the fact that that's happening. But going to cybersecurity, I think is extremely key because we needed to set up the frameworks for cybersecurity, and that was done. We had a number of policies and guidelines that had to be done in that time. But we also had to create layers of information security around our data center that, of course, I can't go into for obvious reasons. But our data center, our disaster recovery center are all layered with information security layers, which allow us to protect, of course, citizens' data and government data. So both frameworks and systems were set up. But I think also important to note, we set up what we're calling a computer emergency response team, or SAT, which also provides emergency response to cyber attacks. And we now running that on behalf of government. It is the one-stop place, even for some of our security forces, but I can't go into detail with that. But basically, we support on the cyber security front, and all of this was a result of RCIP. So these are part of the discussion points, Richard, that we're able to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Director E-Government, for that, of course, elaborate discussion on of course, the cybersecurity and of course the unified messaging. And of course, we are encouraging all government entities, to work with us for UMCS. We have the licenses with us, and please, if you're a government entity and you need our support, we are readily available for this. Now, back to maybe Paul, in terms of infrastructure. Of course, we've laid all this infrastructure across the country, and of course, we still have areas for of course, some gaps still, we still have work to do. What is the plan for rolling out this infrastructure as far as the parishes? We know recently government, of course, came up with the parish development model, and all our planning should be geared towards having services at all levels of government administration. And of course, the lowest level would have been, for now, government is targeting services down to the grassroots at parishes. What is our plan? Of course, looking at what we've already done, the efforts that government has enabled us, given that opportunity for NITAU to expand this infrastructure further to the parish level. What are the plans of getting there? Are we, in the next 1 or 2 years, shall we see ourselves having services deep down into those service areas, sub-counties, town councils? What is our plan for it?
Yes, thank you very much, Richard, for that question. Following the completion of RC, government has been actively engaging with development partners and government within itself funds to ensure that we expand this connectivity. What we have done now is quite big, but still a drop in the ocean. As I mentioned, we were covering just about 55 of the districts, of the current districts. And now what government has approved and is in the final stages of implementation is the new project, which is going to ensure that in the next phase of our infrastructure expansion, we are going to do this in one big whole, which means that in the next project, we are going to cover all the districts in the country within the next 5 years, starting within the next 5 years. This is going to be through two projects. One of these projects is going to be under UDAP, which is an extension of RCIP, which we are celebrating, and while the other one will be what we call phase 5. So what we are planning now is to at least send the optical fiber network to at least every sub-county. The plan, of course, is to make sure that connectivity goes to every parish. But if we get in the process of getting to every sub-country within the country, not just the district, but every sub-country, then we can also partner with private sector and the existing ISPs to now have this last mile going to every single parish. So in summary, the next phase, the way we have scoped the next phase is that we want to do this once and cover the entire country so that there is equitable connectivity to all the geographical areas. This includes even the islands, some of these hard-to-reach areas like the islands, the mountainous regions, and to get to every single border in the country. So our next phase is going to be the big one, really, where we cover the entire country and make sure that connectivity reaches every corner of Uganda. Thank you.
Yes, yes, Paul. I can see some people are already texting me here on WhatsApp that are we only going to use, to only use fiber for extending services? Is then fiber too expensive? I can see some questions already coming. Maybe you can just highlight a bit, and also where does the private sector come in all this? We know that the private sector has also built infrastructure, of course, that to leverage on to extend services. So I can see some involvement. Of course, the private sector will also want to know how can they come in. Is this infrastructure open for them to utilize? Is it readily available? Do we have enough capacity for the private sector to also, of course, use the backbone to transport their respective data? Yes, so maybe briefly you can share some insight on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I captured all the questions that you asked there. The first one is, are we going to expand only using fiber? And the answer is no. But what we want to do is, we keep saying it's just like a human body. There is a backbone. You have to spread coverage to the key administrative areas. In this case, we are saying that if we have backbone connectivity to at least all the sub-counties, then we will use the other technologies to do the last mile. That includes wireless and others. So that's question number one. So we're not going to say that every area will be covered by the optical fiber cable, because indeed, as I mentioned, it's very costly. But we need to expand to the major backhaul areas so that all these other people can tap into what we've connected. Then secondly, you mentioned, they asked how, of course, the private sector can participate in various ways. This capacity that we deploy is enormous, and the backbone is open for resale. Right now, there are many, over 19 ISPs are reusing the excess capacity. So there's open access on the backbone. And what I also wanted to mention is that, which you also asked, is that how do we partner with them? The areas that we are looking at are the areas largely where there has not been a lot of coverage by the existing operators. So when we look at our backbone map, unfortunately we did share it, we are not looking at areas where there's already optical fiber coverage. We are looking to open up new areas so that there is equitable, the experience that you're having here in Kampala should be the same experience that somebody in Kisoro is also having, or somebody in Bundugujo is having. So also on the political side, you need to make sure that the coverage is equitable across the entire country. So that is what we are working to do. I don't know, Richard, if there's any other question that I've missed.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think, thank you for that great insight into, of course, the technology and, of course, the involvement of the private sector in all this development, whether they can use the excess capacity. So the private sector is well covered, and of course, like you heard from Paul, we already have some private sector layers on the backbone. I can see one or two before we go back to Colin. I see from Apollo, you sent a chat there. A big thanks to you for the services you're doing, organizing such educative and informative engagement with all stakeholders being. And yeah, I think great, Apollo, you're very welcome. And of course, our doors are open, for you to, interact with us. Maybe going back to Colin, as we conclude maybe the first session, before we go in, we open it up for questions and answers. Possibly there is RSC touched many sectors, four key sectors, and briefly, maybe can you hint on those four? What kind of services were there? What was our support, and how best can we still, support the sectors to operate efficiently by leveraging or taking advantage of the investment that government had to undertake through RSC. Colin, over to you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, our attendees also today. So indeed, we the idea was to basically transform public service delivery using ICT to improve the lives of Ugandans, which is really the basis of our vision as NITA. And we look to transform our citizens with e-services. And we had to pick four critical pillars under RSC, because you remember we're trying to take on a very big task throughout the government, but all key areas touching our citizens. But we had to pick four major theme areas, and we picked four areas. The first one was agriculture, and the second one was health. The third one was education, and the fourth one was the justice, law, and order sector. So you will see that those four areas, so justice, law, and order sector, think of this really as the judiciary, think of the DPP's office, think about the NERA, think about the police, think about anybody who is in justice and law and order, and then how do we actually do e-services around those areas. So I think we laid the initial foundations in terms of infrastructure, in terms of providing them with the government cloud or data services. We provided the SMS gateway, which now provides most of them notifications that are more affordable than the market. We also provided them with a payment gateway, so payments can also be made through our system. We did the integration in the back end, so you can see that it was really foundational laying for these four sectors. For instance, we had to do what we're calling the agro traceability system, which really tries to bring inputs and outputs, farmers, importers, in the agricultural space. Think about exporters, agro dealers, making their lives easy in one platform area. And this was extremely key, because then what we're calling ATS, or the agro input traceability system, which now allows farmers in that space to work together, with the government, which actually provides subsidies to them, but importers, exporters of all the agro dealers who will provide these inputs in one ecosystem. And that solves a big part of the agricultural inputs marketplace challenges. And this was one of the interventions that we are just actually launching out right now. So we had to go to literally every one of those four key areas to try to identify what are the major issues. Now we've laid the foundations of the things that I've mentioned to you, from infrastructure, data center, SMS, payment gateway. Those are like the foundation laystones. Now the next level should be, how do we now begin to develop applications that ride on top of all of this? We need more e-services. I really want to partner with Makerere University and the students who are even on this call, innovators who are listening out. How do we now begin to think of services for these particular sectors? How do we do, e-health services now that will improve? Of course, we're already working with NMS now. We are providing connectivity to NMS to ensure that NMS can provide services to health centers. They can order for drugs. They can be able to track the drug usage. We are supporting a management health system in hospitals, which is being rolled out now throughout the country. We want to be able to trace the barcode on every drug box, working with NMS and NDA, to actually make sure we know where this box of Panadol is. It was sent from NMS to Karamoja or to Kabong or Kisoro. Is this drug prescribed and used within Kisoro, where it was delivered? Or have we found this drug now in Congo, for instance, because now there is actually smuggling of our drugs for our citizens? How can we have such tracking capabilities for the e-health side to ensure that this box of Panadol that was released from our national medical stores can be tracked all the way, and we can tell that it was prescribed to this and this citizen, to that level? It basically, we should be able to track that this box left NMS, it got to the Kisoro Health Center, it was actually prescribed to particular citizens, and track the usage. Or did we find this box now in Congo, and therefore we need to now work with enforcement, with border control, with police and security services? So you can see that we now have laid the foundations, but now we must put applications that can trace in these areas that can help. In the e-education space now that we have connectivity, which is the foundation, and we have the layers that have been laid already, which Paul talks about. Now we have the ability to, for instance, we set out something called Colibri. Colibri is basically an e-education or an e-learning platform. And this can be set up now in schools to provide centralized content. But we now need to work with NCDC. We now need to work with Ministry of Education. We're also working with the UN to ensure we have the right content. So content now is the next level. But now the foundations have been laid. There's connectivity, there are applications. Now we need the right content to deliver some of these learning applications. Imagine now a child far away who had no access to great learning material, doesn't have to have, you can now have a repository, click on that SST platform and actually study almost everything, world-class information using these services. So you can see that connectivity and the foundations of the infrastructure were important to achieve fast. That is why RCIP was regional communication infrastructure. It was heavily around laying the foundations. But now we need to get to the next level, Richard and the team listening. We need to go to the digital acceleration program now. We need to get to e-services. So we are really welcoming everybody who can partner with us to now begin to build the applications. We have built the infrastructure, and Paul and the team have talked about how they want to extend this infrastructure all the way in the next 5 years. But we need to now engage on the next layer, which is e-services. How can we build e-services for every sector? Lastly, for justice, law, and order, for instance, we were saying, why should prisoners begin to move in buses? You usually see prisoners in buses, heavily guarded, moving from a prison, going to the high court. When we can actually set up a video call in your prison, there's no security required, no bus, no transport, no fuel, no risk of losing the prisoners along the way. But they can now have a video and real-time experience in the prison, communicating with the courts. So you can see that now we have, that's the kind of application now we need to do. Now that we have infrastructure, how can we make simple the lives of the justice, law, and order? How can we now have applications for the police to be able to communicate with the DPP, and we can track a police complaint to a criminal order in DPP, to the court, to the prisons, and all the way back, full cycle. So we're really trying to go sector by sector and see how to now do the services on top of the infrastructure to make sure that we are leveraging this for better efficiency. But we're basically open to the public, and we shall be talking to the public very soon about how they can now contribute to the community of developers. Now that we have the infrastructure running, how can you now come with your application? And if you can provide a good application to the government that can actually make our lives easy, we shall be welcoming that now that we have the infrastructure. But just to say it again, it was health, it was basically education, and of course the justice, law, and order sector, which were very, very key areas for us to focus on. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Colin, for the insightful discussion around e-services, touching, of course, the respective sectors. Just briefly, before we go, and maybe I request the participants, if you have any clarity that you want the panelists to provide, or Nita, we are also joined this seen online. We are joined by our board member, Dr. Annabella. You are very, very welcome on this platform. And of course, all the other participants in your respective capacities, we really, really appreciate your time for being with us this morning. Just briefly, maybe before I request, if you have any questions, any clarity that you want from the panelists or Nita generally, you can then post them on the chat section. But in the meantime, as we go to that, I maybe back to Paul. Paul, for an entity, as you know, we will be rolling out this infrastructure, maybe even to, of course, we talked about the parishes, we talked about, of course, the town councils, municipal councils, maybe for entities that are not connected yet, and of course, they want to be connected. What is the process that they go through to ensure that they of course get connectivity, and of course vis-a-vis all the other services that come along with the infrastructure? So what is that process that they need to go through? I think some people are from this local government. I think these are some that possibly not yet connected them, and they want to know the process that you go through to ensure that they have services at their respective entities or wherever they are. So what is that process that they go through? Just briefly before we go into open it up for questions and answer session.
Yes, thank you for that. In the areas where we had, in the 55 districts where we extended connectivity, we scoped and looked at all the entities that were in those areas and endeavored to try and connect them. So that's why we've been able to connect about 1,400 at present. However, there could be some that we'll share this map that have not been covered. That feel that, for example, you are in a Kabale district and your entity was not connected. Nita is open. You request to the executive director. We normally send communication, email, letter, and then we will be able to access how easy, how near you are to us. And then with the funds that we have, we then do that at our cost. But there are areas where, as I said, there are still areas which are still uncovered. And those are the ones we have scoped in our next phase. We are looking at going from the 1,400 to going to 10,000 within these next few years. We want to cover all the NDAs, their branches, the local governments, target user groups like education, looking at areas of health, both private and public, looking at areas of tourism and industry and all of that, and the ICT. So we are working, we scout a lot. We've scouted across the country to make sure that we support as many as we can, but anybody that feels that they have been left out or might have been left out are always encouraged to come in. We keep a database of all the people who come in. You could come, again, and use an example of Kisoro. You could come in from Kisoro and tell you that we have not yet gone to Kisoro, but maybe in the next 2 years when we're in Kisoro, we'll keep you on our radar. So it's open door. You can contact us. I think we'll share the contacts after this, so that if you have any connectivity needs, we'll try our best to meet them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. So our participants, of course, our doors are open in terms of connectivity, and even the other services that Colin talked about earlier, like the UMCS, the Unified Messaging and Collaboration, the data center. Of course, if you want to take advantage of some of these services, simply our doors are open and will be served right. Now, we want to open up, and I request the host, maybe if you have any pertinent issue, pertinent question, of course, to our panelists, and then, of course, to Nita, we are here. We want to open up this session right now for panel, some discussion, or if you have any clarity that you want from our participants. This is the time. We, of course, welcome all your questions. I can see anonymous attendee from the chat section. Will the local government also be able to have access to mobile hotspots for the public? Maybe, Paul, you can take on that head on. This is from anonymous attendee. Will the local governments also be able to have access to mobile hotspots for the public? So, Paul, maybe you can take on that as we wait for others to come. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. In terms of hotspots or the Wi-Fi, we have two strategies. The first strategy is that, for example, in the local governments, especially up country, we find that the offices are spread over many blocks which are not really connected. So what we do when we go up country, you go maybe to Osaka local government, they have 10 buildings over an area. We install Wi-Fi for them in that area to ease the connectivity, because it will help them have mobile hotspots within their campus. So we do that for them, and we create an internal wireless LAN for them to work, which is accessible to them. And then secondly, in some key areas where we have a lot of, where we feel that the public congregates a lot, we also offer public Wi-Fi. This public Wi-Fi is free at certain times. And so I know all over Kampala, a lot of you have been seeing those areas where people congregate. In the past, we have done this after office hours, because we felt that we had the capacity that could be available to the public after office hours. So if, for example, at NITA, people have left after 8, but we still have a lot of bandwidth, we can open it up for the public. So local governments, yes, in your areas, we do a lot of hotspots to enable your connectivity, but then also as members of the public, you will also be able to access the free Wi-Fi, which is available at particular hours in particular areas. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for that clarity. Members, participants, do we still have more? Do we have more? If you have any, you can just, even by raising a hand, then of course our host will let you, speak out. Any clarity that you want from us, we are very available. So we open up for discussion, and if you have anything, by show of hand, or you can even type. Okay, I see question coming. This is from maybe number one from Luanga, Mr. Ronald Luanga. I have heard that NITAU has hosting provisions. Hosting provisions, what's the procedure as a government institution? Again, maybe Paul, can you take on this? Because still, I think, asking for the same service, asking for a service, can the entity take on, the entity represented by which Mr. Ronald Luanga is representing, can they take up the hosting services? And then what is the procedure as a government institution? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ronald. So the procedure is actually very simple. You give us your hosting requirements in terms of storage, processing, and whatever capacity that you need. And then we assess if that storage is available at a particular time on our cloud infrastructure, and then we onboard you. So it's open. You just send a message, an email, or a letter to NITA. We assess your capacity that you need, and then we handhold you to make sure that you get integrated and then into cloud infrastructure. As Director Colin actually mentioned earlier, we already have 200 entities that are benefiting from this. So maybe you would also like to just add a bit on that.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I think to Ronald, we do already have about 200 government shared applications. They could either be shared actually, or just entities that want to host. And in a nutshell, we're saying, I think the procedure is clear. You know, I know governments like to write, which is important. So write a letter from your accounting officer in government to our ED, the executive director of NITA, and we shall actually start the process. Right away, you mention the capacities that you have, who is the contact person. From that point onwards, we hold your hand until we have you in the data center. It also depends, like Paul says, on how much capacity you want, and do we have that full capacity, or can we start somewhere and then grow? And the beauty with data centers is that it can scale and extend and stretch easily. So it has elasticity that's been built in. You can begin with a few, capacity bits of RAM or processing power, and that can begin to grow, or storage. So I think start right away, Ronald, by writing to us and actually getting us started. And I'm sure we can even share phone numbers here for you, just to be able to just make a phone call after here and actually get started. But we have almost 200 applications of similar nature. We're running government applications. Some of the largest in the government actually sit with us. So we have the capacity to go from very large, like the whole payroll, the whole HR system for the government with us, the whole of procurement system for the whole of government, to even small licensing portals, COVID tracking applications, small applications running with us at the data center. So we are really open to serving you. I think I hope that helps, Ronald, and we're happy that you can either call us, but writing will get the process started. Thank you.
Okay, I think let me just take on this, the one, I think from Mr. Rogers Obo, I think wants some clarity on the regional infrastructure project. What is it exactly in a nutshell? The Regional Communication Infrastructure Project is a World Bank funded program. Uganda was, I think, the 8th country to benefit from the Regional Communication Infrastructure program. Of course, the program stretched into other East African countries like Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, and then we had also Mozambique, Malawi, and Comoros. And of course, Uganda being one of them also benefited from this project. And we are closing this project. It was a 5-year project. We are closing it this very month, end of month. The project will come to a closure. And what we are handling today is actually basically some of the benefits that government has reaped from this project. And of course, also I must say that this project basically targeted 4 key sectors, as you heard from Colin, Director e-Government, targeted the 4 key sectors: agriculture, health, education, and of course the JLO sector. And then of course it had just 2 objectives. One was to lower the cost of bandwidth in the country for government, and also to expand the geographical reach, and then of course the development and rollout of applications to make government more efficient as we serve as citizens. So that is mainly it. What we are discussing here this morning, of course, the achievements out of the regional communication infrastructure project. So I believe that, Mr. Rogers, that helps, but our doors are open if you want to learn more. Even on our website, we have info there. But again, I must say that our doors are open for much more clarity than what are provided. From anonymous attendee, will a private sector institution or company be able to also use the same services like government departments and also have their data within the data center. I maybe pass this to Colin. Colin, there's a question there from anonymous attendee that will a private sector institution or company also be able to use the same services like government departments and also have that data within the data center?
Thank you. Thank you. I think good question. The primary objective was really to build this data center for government services. So it was really heavily to bring government efficiencies because people, government institutions all build data centers. Imagine every institution with a data center, sometimes for only one application. But you have to have cooling, you have to have power, you have to have security, access control. So we did one majorly, and I must confirm, for the public sector, which is government. And I think that's working. So the applications you see me talk about are actually government application. That said, we host a few private sector, and maybe Paul, could expound also on that. We host a few private sector, but they actually pay for being hosted there. They have an arrangement. So I think it is something we can discuss on one-on-one, in a sense, just to see if it meets the criteria and whether you can actually have either a hosted space where you put a secure hosted space, or you actually sit within the cloud, our servers, or you bring your server in. But this is a subjective area because this is for government primarily, and our first choice is to do it for the government. But I think depending on some of the cases we've had, I don't know, Paul, if you can expound on that. We've had one-on-one cases where people actually pay to come in, especially some of the large telcos who have actually come and talk to us. Paul, is there a special case for private sector that we can clarify, or is this still under policy creation? Yeah.
Yes, I think you've answered it. It was largely for government, as you know. But the good news is that we also have a private sector that is now also supporting in hosting. So that is one of the areas where you could look. But right now we're really supporting government entities. Yeah.
Okay. It looks like our panelists are very, satisfied with, the discussion. I don't see any other, not even a hand online. I must. We just left with about maybe 10 minutes to close our session, and we have one of our board member. I possibly maybe just need to give an opportunity, to share some insights and around what, of course, NITA does and where possibly we need support. And so, Dr. Annabella, I know this is the time. And of course, as you also wrap up, because I see we only have 10 minutes and I don't see any other questions. So kindly, and you could also wrap up our discussions today. Thank you. You're very welcome. Yes, Dr. Annabella. I hope the microphone is not, actually, I see the microphone is still muted.
Although, Richard, there's something I think we forgot to share, even as, Dr. Annabella is on now. I think if she gets on.
Okay.
But I know there's an area we forgot to just touch on, which is always very pertinent for our listeners and our attendees. I don't know if you briefed them on the drop on the internet cost at the beginning of this of RCIP and possibly where we want to go, because I think it's critical for anybody who's listening to understand that as we are building these foundational layers for infrastructure, our goal, as you mentioned, the first major objective was to reduce that cost. I don't know if you wanted to just sort of share that briefly as hopefully Dr. Annabella comes on.
Okay. Thank you, members. I think we forgot. Just But maybe just to say briefly about the drop in connectivity. Indeed, when we started when we started RCIP, the cost of internet bandwidth to government was on average about 1,200, and that spans from, it was about from about 2012, because we started rolling out this infrastructure in RCIP in 2016. But from then, the cost of internet was about $1,200, $1,200, and that was a very huge cost for government. And you can imagine that if you went to entity A would go maybe to another private sector to get this internet, and they will charge differently, but on average it was about 1,200. Then what did we do through this project? Under this project, of course, we did an assessment of the requirement of government, of course, projected from 2016 up to now. We projected that, of course, government would use about, and because that was also dependent on the funds provision under RC, that government would use about 10 gig, and this would be procured in bulk. And of course, we wanted to leverage on the economies of scale, and therefore we purchased this bulk internet from the upstream, and we were able to reduce that from about 1,200 to about to $300. Then within the project, within this project, the moment we purchased this bulk internet in 2017-18 financial year, we dropped this cost to $70. And then we are also anticipating that in the near future, as we continue rolling out this infrastructure, we will definitely continue dropping this internet. We want to lower the cost of doing business, of course, in government, lower the cost of communication, and that's what our target is that this cost should go down, and so we are working on mechanisms, of course, on the strategy on, of course, reducing this internet bandwidth, even the cost even much lower than the $70. However, we also have for really special interest groups like the education sector, some of the NGOs that are into the community. We of course have rates for them as well, and of course we treat them as case by case, just to see that we through this infrastructure, everyone is included into utilizing the services from the backbone. So to government entities, we are currently providing internet at $70, and of course this is the cheapest across the country so far. If you went across if you contacted the service providers, the private service providers, you'll find that this internet is so far the cheapest. So we believe that as we continue rolling out these services to other areas, the parishes, the sub-counties, and all the other districts that are still not yet connected, and also the other service centers, government service or administrative centers across the country, then we will definitely reduce this even much lower. So that is something that it is work in progress, and we believe that with your support and with all with support of government, we will definitely take this country to that level where the cost of doing business is much lower. And even our startups, this will also go a long way in helping our startups to also leverage on that to be able to deliver services to citizens. So that is where we stand at this moment. I don't know whether Dr. Annabella, you come on board just to say one or two words, because we can see we only have about 3 minutes to the end of our session. Doctor, over to you. I'm not so sure whether Doctor is getting us, but I think because of our time, we can then possibly, our panelists, once again, we want to thank each and every one of us for you to have come to attend this webinar this morning. I want to thank you for your time. I also want to take this opportunity on behalf of NITA, on behalf of the ED. The ED would have loved to be here, but it got engaged. We also want to thank all the NITA team for putting this together. Our panelists, you've done us great this morning, and even the participants. Thank you for those insightful questions. These are the things that make us work. Think through our strategies, think through our policies, think through areas, of course, for potential improvements, and of course, engagement. And of course, we need your support. We need that synergy for us to, build a digital government or a digital Uganda. And of course, this starts with all of us. And because you're here, we know you are a potential stakeholder and a partner in this journey. So I take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. And of course, even within the course, this is not going to end here. We will continue, of course, coming online for maybe other areas like cybersecurity, which possibly we didn't touch much, but I believe that next time we will organize in that area, and of course, all the other services that we are undertaking. For now, your host, I'm glad, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to host all of you this time. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, our host, Geraldine, and everyone else that attended this morning. Thank you. Shalom, and we end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.